بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا ونبينا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين لا سيما بقية الله في الأراضين أجل الله تعالى فرجه الشريف اللهم أخرجني من ظلمات الوهم وأكرمني بنور الفهم اللهم افتح علينا باب رحمتك وانشر علينا خزائن علومك برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. خب, Alhamdulillah, we have tawfiq to continue our study of Transcendent philosophy or foundations of Transcendent philosophy. So, after discussing the situation of philosophy before Mulla Sadra, now we want to talk about some of the distinctive features of Hikmat Muta'aliyah. First, we should know that Transcendent philosophy, like peripatetic philosophy and illuminationist philosophy, is a whole series of discussions about philosophical issues. Nowadays in the world, especially in the West, after Hegel, it's very rare to find someone who offers a comprehensive philosophical system. They focus on certain areas. But Mulla Sadra, like Ibn Sina, like Sheikh Ishraq, they dealt with Ilahiyat bil Ma'na al-A'am, which is metaphysics mainly. Ilahiyat bil Ma'na al-Akhas, which is about proving and knowing Wajib al-wujud. They talked about ilm nafs falsafi, philosophical psychology, plus din shenasi falsafi, knowing about religious beliefs from philosophical perspective, like barzakh, like resurrection, ma'ad jismani, corporeal resurrection, sirat, heaven, hell. So they offer philosophical explanations of these beliefs. If we want to say what is the differentia, what is the thing that distinguishes Transcendent philosophy from the other two currents in philosophy, we can say the main thing is Assalat al-wujud wa i'tibariyatul mahiyya. It is actually by emphasizing on Assalat al-wujud that Mulla Sadra developed lots of his ideas. He opened lots of locks with this. Now we give a list of the issues that Mulla Sadra managed to do, all with the help of Assalat al-wujud wa i'tibariyat al-mahiyya, and inshallah then in the book later we discuss them. So with Assalat al-wujud, he managed, number one, to raise and discuss new issues in philosophy. For example, أنحاء الوجود لماهية واحدة, different types or modes of existence for the same quiddity. جسمانية الحدوث for nafs. Before Mulla Sadra, normally philosophers had the idea that nafs is روحانية الحدوث. Mulla Sadra said no, it's جسمانية الحدوث روحانية البقاء. So at the beginning it's corporeal. Nafs comes from development of embryo, the body, substantial motion of body leads to having nafs. But as soon as nafs is created, it's immaterial. روحانية البقاء. بسيط الحقيقة كل الأشياء, something which is absolutely simple in reality, has all the things. تقدم بالحقیقة, تقدم بالحق. So these are issues that he raised in philosophy because of Assalat al-wujud. Number two, there were issues that were raised before, but previous philosophers were not able to solve the problem. Previous philosophers were not able to offer an adequate explanation. For example, وجود رابط معلول, effect is totally dependent on the cause in Mulla Sadra's idea, and it is like وجود رابط, like معنای حرفی. معلول is عین الربط والتعلق بالعله. اور حدوث زمانی عالم جسمانی. This physical world is created and has temporal createdness, حدوث زمانی. معاد جسمانی, corporeal resurrection. مثل افلاطونی, ideas of Plato, eidos in Greek is what in English then we say idea. So those muthul, those immaterial, eternal examples that are there, he explained it through Assalat al-wujud. 3. Offering philosophical rationalization and justification for some of the issues that in the previous philosophers' works were not explained properly, like اتصاف الماهیت بالوجود. This is one of the discussions in the book, how Mahiyya is characterized with existence, how Sayyal and Thabit, something which is changeable and something which is fixed, can have relation, how something which is created and something which is eternal, Hadis and Qadim, can have a relation. Allah's detailed knowledge about things, ilm tafsili, without Allah being himself divided and having combination of things. Allah is basit, but at the same time has detailed knowledge. Why some people die naturally? So these are the things that he offered good philosophical discussion. 4, he sometimes offered new arguments, new proofs. For example, for existence of God, he offered his own version of Burhan al-Siddiqin. For Ibn Sina, Burhan al-Siddiqin was more a matter of Burhan al-wujud wa imkan. Mulla Sadra offered his own account of Burhan al-Siddiqin. Or the fact that Allah has knowledge by presence about things, ilm huzuri. Or the fact that every being has understanding, shu'ur, every being. So he offered new arguments for them. Number 5, responding to the questions which were not solved, or offering new responses, or sometimes raising a question and then himself answering, like problems and objections raised against wujud zihni, mental existence. He himself answers. Answering to the objection of Ibn Kamuna, or some of the problems raised by Fakhruddin al-Razi or Sheikh Ishraq, or even his own. Sometimes he raises himself a question. So he himself makes a question, kind of objection, on the rule Imkana Ashraf, the possibility of what is more noble. And he himself answers. 6, sometimes he takes a new stance, a new position with respect to some questions which were before also there. And this is different from other philosophers. For example, harakat jawhari, substantial motion is something that previous philosophers didn't normally accept. Or ittihad aqil wa ma'qul, he has a special position about this. He has a special account of this. Or the fact that particular images depend on nafs, but their type of dependence is suduri, qiyam suduri, they are issued by nafs. Or about wahdat shakhsi, about uniqueness of existence. Number 7, sometimes there are issues that were discussed in the works of previous philosophers, but Mulla Sadra found that they need a kind of clarification because they were ambiguous somehow. For example, Ibn Sina used to say, al-wuquf ala haqa'iq al-ashya laysa fi qudrat al-bashar. Human beings cannot grasp the realities of things. Mulla Sadra explained in what sense this is correct. Or hukama, philosophers say, al-ilmu bis-sabab al-tam yujibu al-ilm al-tam bil-ma'lul. If you know the complete cause, then you would have complete knowledge about the effect. He explained this. Or al-ilmu bis-sabab la yahsulu illa min jihat al-ilm bis-sababih. If you want to know what is caused, you have to know what causes it. Otherwise, you cannot know. Or the relation between nafs and its faculties. So these are the things that he offered adequate explanation. Number 8, he deepened the discussion about some of the topics, like the fact that Allah is to be glorified. No one is like him. Or about Tawhid Af'ali, unity with respect to divine actions. Number 9, there were issues that before Mulla Sadra looked as if they are controversial or contradictory. For example, some philosophical and some kalami, theological opinions were contradicting each other. Like Hudus al-Qadam was big debate about Hudus al-Qadam. But he managed to bring reconciliation. He, on the one hand, defended the idea of dawam phase. According to philosophers, Fayyaz al-Itlaq must continuously be gracious and generous. On the other hand, Mutakallamin believed in Hudus zamani. So how can we say Allah is absolutely gracious, He is always gracious, but we say also that we believe in Hudus zamani, which means that there was a time that nothing existed. So what happened to graciousness of God at that time? He explained this. Or to bring reconciliation between oneness of reality and multiplicity of its dimensions. Number 10, judging, not just mianji. Mianji means reconciliation, to do reconciliation. Davari means to judge. For example, he judged about the issue of relation between surat and madde. He had the idea that the relation between matter and form is tarkib ittihadi, not tarkib enzimami. It's not that two things are put next to each other. No, they form one unit. Madde and surat make one unit. Or for example, he accepted the idea of Farabi, that tashakhus is because of wujud, not because of awaris al-wujud. Because of existence itself, individuation happens. Or unlike Shaykh Ishraq, who believed in tashkik in mahiyya and zat, he believed in tashkik in wujud, existence. Number 11, there were some fallistic, some wrong arguments developed by some philosophers, and he showed that they are not correct. For example, Shaykh Ishraq has an argument for existence of God, that according to Mulla Sadra, this argument is not complete. Although Mulla Sadra believes in existence of God, he brings his own arguments also. He accepts arguments of other scholars as well, but this particular argument of Sheikh Ishraq, he doesn't accept. He says this is not complete. Or Muhaqqiq Khafri also had some argument about the same topic, about existence of God, which he thought can be established without disproving Dawr and Tasalsul. In Bidayatul Hikmah, we have a chapter in the discussion about Illiya, about Imtina ad-Dawr wa Tasalsul. They said without this also we can, but Mulla Sadra doubts. This is about some of the distinctive features of Transcendent philosophy. Now, what is the main differential between Hikmat Mutali and other things? Fasl Mumayyiz. We said the main thing is Assalat al-wujud wa i'tibariyatul mahiyya. But this is because of a big problem. Mahiyya is something about mind. Images that we have of realities in our mind, they are so much near the realities that sometimes we think these are the realities. Imagine if in front of you, you see someone is for example, speaking, you can see, you can hear all the details. Then you want to go closer to that person and talk to him. When you go closer, you find that this was a TV or this was a mirror. It was so close to the reality that you thought the same person is in front of you while he's away. This is the TV, this is the image of that. One of our common problems is that we attribute characteristics of external realities to mahiyat in our mind, to their images in our mind, or vice versa. Things which are for mahiyat, we attribute to the things outside. Mulla Sadra very much tried to shed light on this and make people aware that they shouldn't make mistake between wujud and mahiyat. These are to be distinguished from each other, although they are very close. Mahiyat relays to us wujud. And all the things that we said before, these 11 things, go back to this issue, that to be able to distinguish, not to attribute characteristics of mahiyat to wujud or characteristics of wujud to mahiyya. Assalat al-wujud is all understood by Mulla Sadra because he managed to distinguish between wujud and mahiyat. Then, after Assalat al-wujud, we have three important things that come out of it and serve as foundations for Mulla Sadra's philosophy. One is tashkik dar wujud. Wujud has degrees, hierarchical degrees. Number one. Number two, ma'lul has wujud rabit, has dependent existence. Number three, harakat jawhari. So, Assalat al-wujud, and based on that, three things. So these are not four of them at the same level. Assalat al-wujud is more underlying, then harakat jawhari, wujud rabit ma'lul, and tashkik dar wujud are three things that are dependent on that. These four issues are four most fundamental issues in Transcendent philosophy. You can say these are like foundation, these are like the basic pillars of Transcendent philosophy. Now, the last question from chapter 2 is methodology of Transcendent philosophy. You know, Muslim philosophers are foundationalists. In epistemology, we said foundationalism means that you start with badihiyat. First you have badihiyat, which are primary, and then you have some badihiyat which don't need argument, but they may need some kind of observation or experience, etc. It can be internal experience, it can be external experience, or fitriyat, which qadaya qiyasatuha ma'aha. So they come with their own arguments. So Mulla, Sadra, and Muslim philosophers in general, they are foundationalists. They start with badihiyat and build upon those badihiyat and come higher. For them, we need to discuss, but very briefly, we can say, for example, one of the major badihiyat is asl imtina ijtima al-naqizain and irtifa al-naqizain. In English, they say principle of contradiction. They say asl tanaquz. We say asl imtina tanaquz, but they say principle of contradiction. It's the same thing. Another thing that is one of the badihiyat is asl wujud waqiyat. The fact that there is such a thing as reality, such a thing as existence. It's not that everything is illusion. Number three, the fact that we can know, ability to know. And the other one is, it's impossible to prefer something without having any preference. Tarjih bila murajjih. So these are the things that are foundations for Muslim philosophers. And Mulla Sadra's idea was that, like other philosophers, he was a foundationalist. He had the idea that we start with badiyat, and with our intellectual discourse we can establish other, facts, other ideas. So his ontology was intellectual. If he mentions Quran, or he mentions hadith, or he mentions mystical findings, is not to replace aql. His methodology is still intellectual, but he may mention these things for different reasons. Sometimes to support as istishhad, as, I don't know, to explain, maybe sometimes to show that what we understood from intellectual perspective is correct. Sometimes maybe he has different interpretation of what is mentioned in the hadith, for example. But basically, he didn't replace ravish aqli, intellectual approach, with anything else. Sheikh Ubudiyat says revelation and mysticism and things like them, for transcendent philosophy, can function in different ways. For example, they can inspire new issues. You can get a new issue when you reflect on Quran or Hadith, or want to interpret mystical findings. Number two, they inspire philosophers to actually come up with intellectual solutions. Quran can put into our mind a new philosophical, rational argument. It's possible. For example, Quran says, أَمْ خُلِقُوا مِنْ غَيْرِ شَيْءٍ أَمْ هُمُ الْخَالِقُونَ أَفِي اللَّهِ شَكٌّ فَاطِرُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ or لَوْ كَانَ فِيهِمَا آلِهَةٌ إِلَّا اللَّهُ لَفَسَدَتْ. So Allah is trying to sometimes inspire our aql. Number four, what we find in the Quran or Hadith or Irfan can be mu'ayyad, can be a support for what we understand by aql. We already have aql, we can check it rationally, but we can have a extra support through revelation or Irfan. Number five, to show that there is harmony between aql and naql and kashf. Mulla Sadra very much wants to say that there is harmony between what we find aql, what we have through revelation, and what we have through mystical findings. Number six, he wants to check findings of aql with findings of revelation or irfan, so that if there is any conflict, then we can check where in our aqli approach we made mistake, or where we think in thinking that this is religious approach, we made mistake. Number six, if there is conflict through aql, we can examine and find out where we have gone wrong. And sometimes also in order to make the reader or the audience comfortable. Sometimes people when hear new thing, they are very worried, they're very troubled. But if you say that this is mentioned in the hadith or Quran or Rafa have said this, it becomes easier for them. So Mulla Sadra himself is a very important point. Mulla Sadra himself was a philosopher who never replaced rational argument with anything but supplemented that. But as a person, he had a special idea. This was not a condition for philosophy. But he himself had the idea that whatever is proved or established rationally, I must understand it through mystical experiences. He had such expectations, such standards for himself, that I should not be satisfied with understanding something only rationally. I have to also experience it through irfan. But if other people, for example, just want to study things philosophically, it was okay. He was not saying that philosophy is not adequate. He was saying that I don't find having just philosophy is adequate for me. I need to find the same thing through mystical findings or through, for example, revelation. Alhamdulillah, we completed lesson 2. Inshallah, bi'iznillah. Next session, we start lesson 3 or chapter 3 of the book about Assalat al-wujud wa i'tibariyatul mahiyya, which we said is the most fundamental principle in transcendent philosophy. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. May Allah bless you. Thank you. So inshallah we meet next week bi'Iznillah.
Inshallah.
التماس دعا.
التماس دعا.
خدا حافظ.